Hi, and welcome to Biopilates Deep Dive for a new episode. Today, I invite you to take the time to explore an exercise that is both subtle, demanding, and fascinating from the Stott Pilates repertoire on the reformer sidearm preps, sitting in external rotation. Behind this seemingly simple movement lies a whole biomechanical intelligence of the shoulder, the scapula, the trunk, and the breath. Together, we will take a closer look at what is happening in this exercise, understand the muscles at work, the compensations to avoid, and why this preparation is so valuable in a serious, refined, and conscious movement practice. When I teach it, I never see it as just an arm movement. I see it as a study in precision, a study of the shoulder, of course, but also of the trunk, of breathing, of stability, and of how the body resists compensation. Because here, the real subject is not simply pushing the carriage. The real subject is being able to create external rotation of the humerus without losing the quality of the axis, the stability of the scapula, or the neutrality of the pelvis and the spine. The starting position itself is already a lesson. I sit upright with a neutral pelvis, a neutral spine, and my gaze oriented to the side. The legs are crossed. The hand closest to the foot bar holds the strap. The upper arm remains by the side, the elbow bent at 90 degrees, the hand positioned in front of the torso, palm facing inward. The other hand rests on the hip. The scapulae are stabilized. And already, at this stage, everything begins, because scapular stability is never rigidity. The method very clearly reminds us that the scapulae must rest on the rib cage, glide along it without lifting off, without collapsing, without excessive tension. They rely on dynamic muscular support since they have no direct bony attachment to the thorax. In this exercise, this means I am looking for a scapula that is present, organized, but not frozen. A scapula that offers the humerus a stable base of support. I begin by inhaling to prepare. This inhale is not decorative. It allows me to establish thoracic width, awareness of alignment, diaphragmatic availability, and deep core engagement. In this approach, breathing contributes to the stability of the thoraco-lumbo-pelvic complex, particularly through the relationship between the diaphragm, the transverse abdominis, and the pelvic floor. Then, on the exhale, I keep the humerus as still as possible in space, and I initiate the external rotation at the glenohumeral joint to push the carriage. This is where the exercise becomes truly fascinating, because if I do not understand what true external rotation of the shoulder is, I will immediately cheat. I will open the elbow. I will pull with my back. I will excessively retract the scapula. I will lean. I will rotate the torso. I will seek range of motion where I can steal it instead of building it where it should originate. External rotation at the glenohumeral joint here is the movement of the humerus rotating laterally around its longitudinal axis. It is not the rib cage rotating. It is not the scapula escaping backward. It is not an opening of the arm in space. It is a fine, precise, almost understated movement. And yet for it to be clean, it requires remarkable organization throughout the rest of the body. The two key muscles I want to highlight today are the infraspinatus and the teres minor. The infraspinatus originates from the infraspinous fossa of the scapula and inserts onto the middle facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus. It is innervated by the suprascapular nerve, primarily from the C5 to C6 roots. Its primary action is external rotation of the humerus, but it also plays an essential role in coaptation, that is, centering the head of the humerus within the glenoid cavity. It does not simply create movement, it protects the joint during movement. The teres minor, on the other hand, originates from the upper part of the lateral border of the scapula and inserts onto the inferior facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus. It is innervated by the axillary nerve, also mainly from C5 to C6. It contributes to external rotation and to the posterior stability of the shoulder. Smaller, more discreet, but no less essential. It refines, it supports, it complements, it gives clarity to the gesture. During the active phase of the exercise, as I exhale and push the carriage, these two muscles work concentrically to produce external rotation. Then, as I inhale and return to the starting position, they work eccentrically to control the carriage's return. And that changes everything because the exercise is not only about going out, it is also about the ability to come back without collapsing, without letting go, without being passively pulled by the spring. The return is often where the truth of motor control is revealed. Many people can do the movement, few can sustain it. And in Pilates, sustaining is just as important as producing. But I cannot speak about external rotation without speaking about the center. The essence reminds us clearly: the transverse abdominis, the deep pelvic floor, the obliques, the multifidi, and the spinal extensors are all engaged to stabilize the pelvis, the lumbopelvic region, and the neutral spine, while preventing unwanted trunk rotation and lateral flexion. This is fully aligned with the Stott Pilates principles. Neutral pelvic placement and core engagement allow for better force transfer and better load management. In other words, if my center does not work, my shoulder will overwork. If my pelvis is unstable, my scapula will compensate. If my rib cage lifts or shifts, the quality of the movement changes. The body always works in chains. And this exercise reminds us that apparent isolation is often a refinement of global coordination, not true isolation in a simplistic sense. I also really enjoy teaching the hand variations with the palm facing up or down because they reveal how small changes can affect line of pull, sensation, and neuromuscular organization. A palm facing upward often facilitates a more open and fluid sensation, while a palm facing downward increases the challenge of centering and demands more refined stability. These are not just ergonomic details. They are true variations in muscular work. From a pedagogical perspective, this fascinates me. Teaching a new exercise requires naming it, clarifying the starting position, demonstrating the movement, explaining the breath, and then addressing anatomy, biomechanics, key focus points, modifications, and common mistakes. And this exercise is perfect for developing that teaching intelligence. It forces you to see. It forces you to observe. It forces you to distinguish true glenohumeral rotation from thoracic or scapular compensation. The common mistakes are extremely revealing. I often see shoulders lifting, the upper trapezius taking over, elbows drifting outward, the rib cage shifting, or conversely, excessive fixation of the scapula, making the movement rigid and artificial. I also see students chasing carriage performance instead of movement quality. But here, what matters most is not how far the carriage moves, it is the purity of the organization. I often remind my students that the scapulae are not meant to be squeezed, they are meant to be organized. The rib cage is not meant to be locked. It is meant to be placed. The pelvis is not meant to be held rigidly. It is meant to be neutral and available. And the breath is not meant to be forced. It must support the movement intelligently. What I deeply love about this exercise is that it connects rehabilitation, performance, and pedagogy. In rehabilitation, it helps rebuild a shoulder that is more centered, more refined, more stable. In performance, it prepares for movements where the rotator cuff must resist, decelerate, support, and transmit force. And in teaching, it trains the eye to become more precise, more subtle, more demanding. It also reminds us of a fundamental truth. Shoulder strength is not measured only by what it can move, but by how well it can remain centered while moving. And perhaps that is the true lesson of sidearm prep sitting, external rotation. It is not a small arm exercise. It is a biomechanical meditation on the relationship between mobility and stability, between center and periphery, between breath, posture, and motor control. It is an exercise that forces us to slow down, to observe, to refine. And in a world where intensity is often confused with quality, I find it essential to come back to this, to a humerus that rotates without drifting, to a scapula that supports without gripping, to a trunk that stabilizes without stealing the movement, to a breath that accompanies without interfering. This is for me where true Pilates begins, in this precision, in this awareness, in this quiet rigor. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe or share it to help it reach more people.